I think it was disgraceful that the intelligence agencies allowed any information that turned out to be so false and fake out. I think it's a disgrace. And I say that, and that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. I think it's a disgrace. That information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public. As
on the waters, happy Cinco de Mayo. The best taco bowls are made in Trump Tower Grill. I love Hispanics. Obama just endorsed crooked Hillary. He wants 4 more years of Obama, but nobody else does. The Clinton campaign fired back, tweeting, "Delete your account." That's now the single most retweeted message of Hillary Clinton's campaign. Trump jabs back. How long did it take your staff of 823 people to think that up? Where are your 30,000?
Hello and welcome to my podcast that I'm going to promptly name Let's Talk About It. And in this episode, what we will be talking about is the 2016 election and how social media played into it and how further social media affected journalism during the 2016 election. It's kind of like a whole inception of topics. So, to start out with, I had pretty basic questions on just how America responded to the use of social media during the election, how they acted towards each other, how they acted towards politicians, to the presidential candidates in general, how the candidates reacted to each other and to their public, to news sources, talking about them. So we'll start off with that, and then we'll get into the journalism aspect of the whole shebang. So, pretty basic questions, and, I looked at how candidates use social media to connect with their voters. They made public declarations on apps like Twitter's, interacted with fellow candidates, used it to slander their opponents, to release statistics. Just pretty basic things, normal campaigning things that were maybe just made a little bit easier through social media, whether they used Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Those are the main apps they would use. I don't really think a lot of presidential candidates are out there using Snapchat. So this led to, how did voters react to the election in general, the candidates, what the candidates were tweeting or sharing on their social media. And, I found that a lot of voters they shared their opinions, or they shared articles that supported their opinions, but not in a very nice way. A lot of opinions were very aggressive. Whole lot of, if you don't agree with me, unfriend me. If you support X, Y, and Z, unfriend me. I'm proud to be this. If you don't like that, then bye-bye. So it's really interesting. And not only were people like this with, people in their everyday lives or people on their friends list, they were like this to the candidates themselves. I don't know how many tweets there are out there of people just slandering candidates, whether it was Trump, whether it was Hillary, whether it was Jeb Bush, whether it was any of the other candidates early on in the 2016 election. There's a lot of aggression on social media during the whole election process. And, why did voters use social media so much? And, for a new generation that's grown up with all this great technology, it's an easy way for Americans to consume news. They have articles that pop up on their news feed. Maybe they just read a headline and that's where they get their information from. Whether maybe even they follow news sources. Maybe they follow Fox News or CNN on social media. It helps that the presidential candidates are sharing what they plan to do, sharing their campaign information, sharing harmful details that might get their opponents in trouble. And even though, not all news on social media was accurate, swaying voters in favor of one candidate over the other it happened, you know? Whether it was accurate or not, it happened. So I guess this kind of brings me into what is the link between journalism and social media? And, you know, I kind of went over it. There's journalism outlets that have Twitter or Facebook, and they share their articles, they share news clips using these platforms. And another way is over half of the nation receives their news through social media. In fact, 62% of American adults receive their news from social media. Which, you know, it wasn't helpful during the election considering the amount of fake news that was circling around. What definitely was not helpful whatsoever. And, you know, fake news was everywhere, but it seems that it mostly occurred on Facebook, and actually the most popular fake news stories were even more widely shared on Facebook than the most popular mainstream news stories. This means that people saw these fake headlines, they believed it, who knows if they read the article, I'm not them, but they saw it and they felt the need to share it more than actual credible sources. So rather than sharing, I don't know, Fox News, the Washington Post, the New York Times, what have you, they were like, hey, this BuzzFeed article says that Hillary Clinton is running a sex trafficking ring out of this pizza place. You know, that seems pretty believable. I'm gonna retweet it. I'm gonna share it on Facebook. See where it goes. And, you know, some of them are so out of the box, you start to wonder, who would believe that? But actually, many people who say fake news stories report that they actually believe them. And, you know, it makes you wonder, how did that affect the election? Did it favor one article? One opponent over the other? Like, what was the deal with that? And it actually turns out that the most discussed fake news stories tended to favor Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. So, in fact, this database contains that 115 pro-Trump fake stories that were shared on Facebook a total of 30 million times, and 41 pro-Clinton fake stories shared a total of 7.6 million times. And, well, you know, Hillary Clinton, it's a big number. 7.6 million is a big number, but it doesn't really compare to 30 million. And, you know, it's just these fake news stories were popping up so rapidly on these timelines. It would be hard not to share them. So through this, you know, data, it's kind of easy to conclude that the fake news it favored Donald Trump. Yeah, he had some fake news stories written about him, but he was never accused of having a sex trafficking ring. Or, you know, trying to enforce Muslim beliefs in Florida. And these are just like a couple of real news headline stories that were shared. And in the end, it actually looks like quite a bit of voters were convinced by these fake news stories and decided, you know what, Hillary Clinton, maybe she's not the most credible. Maybe she actually does have a sex trafficking ring. Who knows? Who knows what goes on in the mind of voters? But social media, man, it's a weird place. It's wild to think about that journalism in general, especially fake news, has such a impact on people that people can believe it so easily without finding the credible sources, or that journalists can write these stories without fully investigating what they're writing about, whether they have the right person or not. It's as simple as that. And I think journalists are responsible for that. They should at least make sure that what they're writing is credible, that it's accurate, because you're sharing this news with the masses of people, and it might ultimately end up affecting you, affecting the country that you're living in. It's just, it'd be cool if fake news didn't exist. I'd be curious to see what our country would be like now, who would have won the election if it wasn't for fake news? Would it have ended up the same? Would President Trump have ended up winning anyway? Or would the lack of fake news kind of sway the vote Hillary's way? It's hard to say. It really is. But in the long run, I guess people really just need to be paying attention to what they're consuming and maybe rely on more than social media to consume their news. There's more to life than Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And unfortunately, this generation of people in this wave of new technology, it's hard to see that. But I hope that through all the fake news that, reared its head in 2016 during this election, that we learned something as a nation, as a society. And, I guess it's kind of hard to not depend on Twitter for news, considering our president makes a bunch of declarations and tweets about what he has planned for our country on Twitter. Alrighty, thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about politics and the election and fake news and yada yada. Hope you enjoyed. Campbell.